G'day and welcome to my channel. My name is Mark and I'm a 58-year-old ultra distance runner living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. I'm giving regular updates on my training and heading into some races early next year as well. So if you're interested in that, well, this is a channel you might want to stick around and watch for a while. So I've just come back from COVID after another few weeks of being smashed by that terrible virus, and in the last 2 days I've had really good training sessions, so I feel as though I'm really getting back into it now, and that virus has almost totally left my body. So that's really good news, and now I can start planning around when I'm going to do my 50-kilometer ultra running challenge that I'm setting for myself. And I'm going to pick a date in December to do that, probably somewhere close to Christmas. I think that'll be nice to do it before Christmas, and yeah, aim for that and see how I can go in running 50 kilometers as a bit of a challenge for myself here in beautiful Cancun. We've seen a couple of cooler days in the last 2 days, so no longer am I running in 30 degrees Celsius. It's been down to about 23, 24, which is absolutely beautiful for this part of the world, and boy, does the body recognize a big difference as well. Going off today to get some root canal surgery done on my mouth. That's been another thing that I've been dealing with in the last few weeks. Actually, it's been about a month and a half now since I started that process, so that's been drawing on a little bit. So I've got 2 more sessions to go with the root canal process, and then that will be done. So that's been another thing that my body has been adjusting to and dealing with. There's all sorts of things, isn't there, that you have to deal with in life and as a runner as well. In this video, I just wanted to talk about the mind and how we don't spend a lot of time training the mind. And if you're out there watching this video today and you're a runner, I want to ask you this question: do you spend a lot of time training your mind for your running? And the answer is probably no, you probably don't, because I don't know too many runners that actually do. And I think it's such an important part of being a runner is to actually spend time training the mind. And just going to talk about that for a minute or two because I think it's really important. I remember back in the day when I started running marathons and that, I always found it problematic when I got to around about that 30-kilometer mark. I used to always start telling myself about the wall and I'm going to hit the wall, and I had a lot of negative thoughts in my head, and that obviously led also to not such great performances on a few occasions as well. And I thought, you know, this is an area of my training that I really need to focus on, and I've got to get ready for this and start putting some skill sets into place and some tools that I could use to actually overcome the issues around mental thoughts during a race and during your training as well. So some of you may know that earlier this year, back in May, I went over to the UK and did a 750-kilometer run through England and Wales. And before I went on that run, I spent some time with a company doing some resilience training for my mind, and it was actually a 10-week course that I did, and it was absolutely fantastic. It provided me with a whole lot of skills that I could use and tools that I could use to train my mind during my run, before my runs and after my runs, and it was very useful. So I just thought I'd share a couple of things with you in this particular video. Now for me, it doesn't matter if you run 5k, 10k, a marathon, an ultra distance marathon. It doesn't matter the distance that you run, your mind is always engaged in the running process. And if you run 5 kilometers, we always get to that stage in a 5k race where we feel, oh boy, things are starting to go wrong, I'm starting to feel tired, I'm running fast, but can I hold it together until the end? And then the same in a 10k race, and then in a half marathon we get to that stage where it starts to become challenging mentally. And it's at those times in races that I think it's important to have tools that can help us overcome that negativity. And anybody that's done an ultra race will know that that comes a number of times during an ultra race, and you have a lot of highs and you have a lot of lows. And it's really important on how you deal with that. So I think the first thing to remember is when you go out for a training run, you're not going to run a PB every time you go out running. So I think it's important to have the mind turned on to what actually training session you're going to do and what you want to get out of that training session, rather than just going out the door and going for a run and coming home and looking at your watch. I find that a pretty pointless exercise. I always like to have a goal for every training run, and I know what that goal is before I go out the door in the mornings. And what I do is I set my mind to that particular goal, so I don't get stressed about it. I just say, okay, if I'm going out to do a tempo run, I know what pace I want to run at. If I'm going out to do an interval session, again, I know what pace I'm going to work at, and I've got my mind switched on to that pace. I know what that pace feels like, and I've dialed my mind into that training session, so none of it comes as a surprise. And then I use my warm-up process as another way of getting my mind ready for that training session. So I typically do a 10-minute warm-up before every run, some dynamic stretching. And during that dynamic stretching, I'm not just focusing on stretching my muscles and my joints and my body, I'm actually also stretching my mind and getting my mind into the right frame of thought process. So when I start that training session, I'm already dialed into it. And these are little things that you can do that have a really big impact on your training, and then obviously leading into races as well. So if you're somebody that hasn't spent any time training your mind and preparing your mind, whether it be for your training sessions or your races, then this is something that could help you. Okay, let's talk about a couple of tools that you can use to help your mind in your running process. And the first one is stability zones. What are stability zones? Well, they're those things that you always fall back on in your life that make you feel good, that give you grounding and give you that sense of stability, as it's called. It's a stability zone. And for me and for most people, it's going to be your family. And I always have my wife and my puppy dog and my mother-in-law as my stability zone. So no matter when I get into a difficult situation, I always think about them because they bring me a lot of pleasure and they make me feel grounded. So when I'm in a race and things are getting really, really difficult, I don't second question myself in terms of my self-belief. I go to my stability zones in my mind and I think how happy that makes me feel and how proud I am to be able to do this and how proud they are of me in doing this as well. So making sure that you understand what your stability zones are before you even take on a training block or a race, it can be quite helpful indeed. And then the next thing we usually do in a race is when those negative thoughts start to come in, we start ruminating over things and we start going down that rabbit hole. What is the best way to move away from that? Well, what I usually do is I have some positive thoughts that I've already prepared in my mind for those times that I go to, and it can be all sorts of crazy things. It can be a great training session that I had, putting myself back into that situation. It can be how I felt on a certain day away from running, and I just bring whatever positive thoughts I can into that particular moment. But first of all, you've got to recognize that you're going down that rabbit hole. So acknowledging that your mind is starting to go off the job, and then quickly bringing in that positive thought straight away and implementing that in your mind. Now that's easier said than done, and this is something that needs a lot of training, and that's why I suggest that in your training sessions you're actually going out there and you're practicing these things, because then when it comes race day, you've already got it in your mind on how you're going to deal with those negative aspects. And as we all know, those negative thoughts, they come in at all sorts of different times throughout a race. They're never consistent. They never pop up at the 11 kilometer mark or the 22 kilometer mark. They're always coming when you least expect it. And they can be caused by all sorts of different things. They can be caused by the weather on the day. Your legs are just not feeling it. You might be feeling heavy. But if you've got these positive thoughts in your mind, they may be sentences, they may be phrases, they might be a quote. It might be something that you thought of the other day that made you feel really good, but you've got them in your toolkit and you're able to implement them straight away. It might be a song that you like to sing to yourself as well. Anything that does something good for you in terms of turning it into a positive thought. So those are things that I do every single time I go training, and I have those positive thoughts ready to put into my mind when things start going or getting a bit tough. And then once you get into the positive mindset, the next job is to be able to maintain it. So it's not just good enough to have a positive thought for a minute, because we all know that that pain's going to return at some stage if you let it. So it's a matter of putting that positive thought into your mind and then maintaining it. So what I do is I let that positive thought germinate inside and create more positive thoughts around it. So I start thinking about that positive thought, and then I think of another one, and then I think, oh, I'm starting to feel really good again. and I trick my body into believing that things have turned around and now I'm feeling really, really good. So that's how I do it, and it tends to work just about every single time. So the key here for me is when you start to have that negative thought, acknowledge it, understand that it's coming, but then quickly get it out of your mind by replacing it with another positive thought. So as we know, we're not too good about thinking about two things at once. So when we have a negative thought, push that out of your mind. The rumination will go away. You'll bring a new positive thought into your mind, and then you let that germinate and create a whole new positive dialogue with yourself for the remainder of the race. Now, another way I do this when I'm actually racing is I use the kilometer markers to guide me into creating those positive thoughts. So I know I'm going to run X kilometers per hour, or a pace of X number of minutes per kilometer. And when I get to that kilometer marker, I give myself a reward by either having a drink, something to eat, or a positive thought, reinforcing a positive thought. And that might just last for about 10 or 15 seconds. And then I look forward to the next kilometer marker coming. And you'll be surprised how quickly the kilometer markers get ticked off when you're doing something like that. So if you try to go through a race as I used to in the past and just let the mind liberally go along, you'll find yourself having all sorts of negative thoughts coming in on a consistent basis. But if you've got some structure to the way that your mind works during a race, then it can really help you put those things into place. So knowing that you're going to drink and eat, every 20 or 30 minutes, making sure that's a religious routine that you put into your training runs as well as your races if you're doing long distance, then that becomes a habitual thing that you can repeat, and your mind is also preparing for it. So when you have a drink, it's a pleasurable moment. When you have something to eat, it's a pleasurable moment because you're giving yourself fuel and food again. So that should be something that you tell your mind that you're rewarding yourself for. So there's a lot of ways that we can create this positive mindset, particularly when we're out training, and making this second nature for when we go into a race situation. So I'd be really interested to hear from you whether you spend time training your mind when it comes to running. And I see a lot of people, they train their core, they do a lot of weights, and they go out there and they run and do a lot of stretching, but I don't see many people at all talking about training the mind. And I think it's a really, really important part of running and also growing as a runner, because what we tell ourselves up here typically makes a huge difference on any race day. Think about it. When you've gone out and run a personal best time, it's not necessarily because you're super fit or anything. It's because your mind stayed dialed in for the whole race, and that's why you've run a personal best time. So the more times we can get this dialed in, the chances of higher success rate is going to be obvious in your running career. So there we go. Let me know what you do for training your mind. Let me know if you don't even train your mind today. Tell me if this video has been helpful for you as a runner, an athlete, or anybody else in life in general, because training our mind, I think, is a very, very important thing. If you want some more tips on training the mind and me to share some more of the skills that I learned, I'm happy to do that. Just let me know in the comments of this video and we can talk about it a little bit more. So there you go, a little video today about training the mind as a runner. I think it's pretty important. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you again really soon on here, my channel, Mark Philpott. Age is no barrier. Remember that. Doesn't matter how old you are. Get out there and go for a run. It could change your life. It did for me. I'll see you all again soon in another video. Until then, stay well, stay safe, and bye for now.